Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.
Welcome back to the Global Indian Podcast, home to the greatest conversations and the official platform for open and liberal minds. Because yes, let's face it, we are everywhere. Now, as you know, every week we plunge ourselves into the human experience behind our perceptions of identity, take a second look at the countries we now call home, and tackle the big conversations. Well, this week, virtually, I find myself in Suriname, this really weird, peculiar Caribbean, South American-ish country where you have a large community of people of Indian origin, and they don't speak English, they speak Dutch, alongside English, of course. And it's really interesting because obviously post the PBD that took place in India, there's been a growing interest from India to really look towards the Caribbean in terms of doing real legitimate trade. In fact, the government of India has produced over 80 billion in lines of credit to actually help facilitate this. But the elephant in the room is we don't know enough. So to help guide me through this incredible country called Suriname, I'm joined by Nilesh, who's a dear friend of a friend, Dane Gobind, all the way in Guyana. But before then, a quick note from our dear sponsors. If you want to find out more about the Global Indian Series, by the way, well, it couldn't be easier. Simply come to the website, which is www.globalindianseries.com. There you can listen to this podcast and the entire repertoire of discussions so far.
Hi, this is Damesh Shingala, co-founder of Novus. At Novus, we believe technology leads the way for a meaningful change. We are on a mission to change the way corporations, governments, and institutions interact with information. Same as the Global Indian podcast, help people transform for a better future. Find out more on how we are inspiring global change, either at the Global Indian Series website or Novus website to learn more about our innovative software solutions. From our family to yours, I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
My name is Chitra Stern, and I am a proud Global Indian Ambassador and CEO of Martiniale Resorts and Martiniale Residences. We pride ourselves on the journeys that define a community, and our developments bring people together. Did you know that over 70,000 people just like us call Portugal home? The Global Indian journey has brought people together in a meaningful way, and on behalf of all of us at Martiniale, we want to thank you for joining us in these remarkable conversations. We look forward to seeing you here in Lisbon post-COVID.
Hi, my name is Divya and I'm co-founder of the Global Indian Podcast. Before you get to today's show, I've got a quick favour to ask. If you've been enjoying our conversations, I'd love if you could take just 1 minute to leave us a review on the platform that you're listening to us on and share our work to friends and family. It helps us out a lot. Word of mouth is the primary way that we grow. Thanks for your continued support.
Questions, Nilesh, what's it like to be you, a Dutch-speaking, Hindi-speaking, English-speaking person in a country that I think the rest of the world doesn't even know exists?
Well, it feels pretty good. It gives you a sense of you are basically a global villager. We are living in a global village. We have been trained. I did my secondary and primary school in Suriname. I did my university in Holland. I came back, and part of my career I have been doing in Suriname. So I'm used to living in different cultures. So for me, it's quite normal. And when it comes to the question, what am I doing in a Dutch-speaking country in South America? Yeah, well, I have always been a Dutch-speaking Indian. I was that in Holland, and now I'm back in Suriname. It's quite unique. We have a very large Indian community in the Caribbean. We call it the West Indies. But actually, we are not part of the West Indies because we are not the Caribbean. We are actually a country in South America, yet involved in the Caribbean. It's unique. And if you look at the history of Suriname, we have been a colony for the last 300 years, 300, even more, 300 years of Holland. And that is the reason that we basically speak Dutch here. And we have become independent for the last 45 years. In 1975, we became independent. So we are now a democratic we do our own thing now. Yeah.
Well, what do you think is the biggest misconception people have when it comes to Suriname?
The biggest misconception is, first of all, that we either speak Spanish or English, because we are quite exotic with Dutch speaking. And I think the next biggest misconception would be that Just like the rest of the Caribbean, you either have people from Africa or from India. We are quite unique in Suriname. We have four quite large ethnicities. You have the Africans, the blacks from Suriname, from Africa. You have the Indians from India. But then we have two flavors that the other countries don't have. And that is we have Javanese people from Indonesia and we have Chinese people from China. And we basically came to Suriname as indented labor after the abolition of slavery. So we're not talking about Chinese migration for the last 15 years. We're talking about Chinese and Indonesian people coming to Suriname more than 100 years back. So that means you have a culture blend for the last 100 years. We have created a culture that is more than just the Indian culture or the black culture. We have Lebanese here coming for the last 80 years. We have native Dutch people as well. We call them the Boeroes, who are basically people that are from Holland. But we also have Jewish influence. So it's a melting pot, quite unique for the Caribbean, and I'm very proud to be part of that community.
Are you the United Nations of the West Indies then? That's what it seems like. It's like everybody's there.
Everybody is there, and it makes it quite unique. I think if you Google on Suriname and you do images, the first picture you will probably get is a mosque beside a Jewish how do
Synagogue.
you say it? A synagogue, correct.
Yeah.
That is something that is quite unique, side to side. And people always use that image to say that we live together very peacefully. And I must say we have a lot of national holidays because all the cultures are basically acknowledged by the government. You cannot leave one out, because you say, okay, yeah, the two biggest populations are the Indians and the Africans. No, everybody is acknowledged in Suriname, and
How
that
how
makes it quite unique.
how have you been able to do something that your neighbors haven't? Now, this may sound slightly contentious, but Guyana, again, great example because you have a very similar past in terms of indentureship. But Guyana is almost rife when it comes to the ideas around ethnic politics. Everything is almost down that tonality. But Suriname, somehow, you haven't had those issues. What's been the secret of success there?
I think the secret of that success is that nor the Indians nor the Africans are able to form a coalition by themselves. They will always require either the Japanese or the Chinese to join them. And that is, I think, quite unique. So it's not a matter of binary one and zero. It's either the Indians who rule or it's the Africans. It's not that way in Suriname. And then you get this interracial community that is also has developed over the years. So I think whenever we have a coalition, it's not solely African minded or Indian minded. It's always a blend. And I think that is something that makes Suriname quite strong. And it forces each Surinamese to think out of their own box. And that own box is your own cultural box. Because at the end of the day, you have to live and be successful with other cultures as well. And that is something that is when we go to school even you will speak Dutch at school, but after school at home you would speak Indian. The Javanese would speak Javanese at home. The Chinese would speak their own language. So you're acquainted that everybody is multilingual in Suriname. It's something that makes it's very difficult to explain until you go to a country where they only speak their own language. If I go to Brazil and I want to speak English, they will say, no, we got it at school, but I don't speak it very well. From the start, we are multilingual in Suriname, and that makes it very unique. And we accept each other, and we are also being accepted for who we are. When I tell my colleagues, listen, it's Mahashivratri, they will know what Mahashivratri is. I don't have to explain it. And if they have their own national holiday, a cultural holiday, um, we understand. It's something that we respect. So
Is it the fact that you do speak Dutch and that's kind of led a very different path in terms of this social cohesion? Because unlike other parts of the Caribbean, Hindi in Suriname is spoken incredibly well. In other parts, it's almost turned into a equivalent of Pidgin English, for example. And has that almost aided for these languages to prosper, that people still have their independent type of culture, they have that linguistic linkages, but at the same time, because you're not speaking a language spoken in the rest of the Caribbean, you almost don't have that infiltration of ideas that normally kind of get pushed across that are quite divisive at times.
True. I truly believe that is one of the reasons. I think that the connection with your culture is a very important ingredient is the language. So if you are able to preserve that language, you will be able to connect to India and its culture. If I look at Bollywood movies, I don't look at the subtitles because I fully understand what it is about. I understand the words with the emotions. I don't have to read it.
Yeah.
So my belief when I go to a Bollywood movie, I literally have the same experience as you or anybody who is in India and understands. So I think that is a very important thing. But please keep in mind that there is one thing that we should not underestimate. The Dutch rulers, 300 years back, they had a very specific way of ruling the country. They said, listen, let them speak their own language so they cannot join forces against us. That was a typical Dutch way of keeping segregation so there would not be, any attack towards the government. And compared to the English way of ruling was they should all speak English, and if possible, let them all join Christianity so they understand us and the way we think. The Dutch were like, listen, let them be themselves, let them do their cultural stuff, let them speak their language. We don't mind as long as there is production. So it's a different way of ruling. So we were able to preserve a lot of our culture and language, and
Oh, interesting.
it's benefiting us very much. It's benefiting us very much.
How does it translate through? Because one thing that you mentioned is obviously the business side. Now, Suriname's obviously looking to make itself a mark. And one thing that we are discussing earlier is that the Caribbean now is at that moment in time to say, we need to mark ourselves, we need to go out there. But there are some elephants in the room when it comes to Suriname. You know what I'm going to ask you. I can see that telltale smile. Now, Nilesh, run me through this, if I may be as frank and candid as I can. Your former head of state was arrested in Suriname. And you've got Suriname going out to the international public saying, hey, come over, come and invest. We're a great country. We are corruption free and we're making waves in the right way. How do you manage the two things together? Because anybody on the outside will be thinking, well, there's a big elephant in the room there.
There is. And we truly acknowledge that this is the elephant in the room. But I think we have to look at from not only from how do you say it? It's not only about governance, and ethics. Suriname is going through its own phases of growth. If you have independence since 1975, you are a very young nation that has been occupied by the West, and everything was being determined for you. This is the way you should walk, this is the way you should talk, this is the way you should rule. Then you become a nation, the liberation thoughts starts early 70s, maybe end 60s. You have a segregated country. So what happens if you give them the freedom to rule you will make some mistakes, just like a child growing up. We are a very young nation, but we are a very proud nation. And I always say, whatever happens with us in Suriname, we have to deal with our own karma. So I don't think I'm not waiting for the West to help us to get rid of things. I think we should clear our own history by ourselves. It's a mental growth process where I truly believe that the Surinamese are ready. And yes, the elephant in the room, he is there for our growth. He was created by us. He was put as a president by the population of Suriname. It was a process that we had to go through, and it was a learning curve for us. And yes, we will have to deal with that. But with that elephant in the room, we are still looking at a very bright future in Suriname, and I'm very optimistic. Although we're going through some rough waters now, I think the destination is clear. Um, We are part of a global village, which are already managed. We are part of the Caribbean. We are part of the Latin America. I think we should look at the opportunities. You are either part of the problem or you want to be part of the solution. I choose to be the last. So that's how I look at this. And I think no, I don't want to make any
I was gonna say,
political.
Nilesh, that was a very strong Obama style speech right there. I found myself raising out of my chair, but come on, like it's interesting because I get every country is going through its own process and it's a learning curve. But how long do you have to go through for that learning curve to come in? Because you're on the edge of a remarkable shift that's happening. You're post-COVID. So now everyone's looking at revenue replacement. Where do we bring the financing coming in? Yeah. People, countries, not even just India, it's also the UK, the whole world is now looking towards certain non-traditional marketplaces. Say, let's expand upon our business opportunities. And as a diaspora, we are the world's largest community. We don't know that much about each other, but that is changing. That's why these platforms exist. But when you do hear these stories, it does create fear. Now, saying that things are changing for the right era, great, wonderful, good. Has it changed as quick as it needs to?
No. When it comes to whenever you want to do business internationally, these are specific things that will pop up. And I think each country will have their skeletons in the closet, if I might say it like that. It's something that is not helping us, but truly, I think that each businessman that understands that it is a democratic state, our judicial system is very strong. Read about it. We are now actually in the final stage of a very important court deal, where one of the revolution leaders is being convicted. It shows when it comes to doing business with Suriname, the judicial system is very strong, very independent. I think that is something that investors will look at. When it comes to the financial system, we are definitely compliant to the international standards of AML, KYC, counterterrorism financing. We are compliant. Our banks still have correspondent banks in the West. That means that our systems are solid, are in place, but are on a focus. So we acknowledge that. But everything is in place. And then the final stage is the business case, the opportunities of Suriname. You're looking at a country that has the highest percentage rate of forest. 92% of this country is full of forest, tropical forest. You're looking at sweet water. So we have a lot of good rivers with sweet water. If you look at the fresh air that our forest is producing, it's unbelievable. If you look at the fact that we are business-wise part of the CARICOM, which is the Caribbean Community, so we have preferential trade opportunities for the Caribbean, but Suriname is also part of Mercosur. Mercosur is the community that is basically has trade agreements within South America. We are also the only nation that is bordering Europe, because on the other side we are part of Guyana. On the other side, we are bordering French Guiana, which is an overseas district of France.
With all those contacts, with all those legislations in place, surely you guys should be far more wealthy than Singapore.
Yes, we are in our mind, definitely. but wealth has to do. Look, I'll be very frank with you, Rajan. When it comes to wealth for a country, you need proper institutes.
Yeah.
All right. Institutes are basically safeguarding that whatever comes in is properly managed and distributed, so the whole country benefits from that. We are on a learning process when it comes to safeguarding these good institutes that should manage money. Money coming in doesn't mean that you are wealthy if you don't know how to distribute it to the rest of the country. So we're looking at leadership here. We're looking at institutes that should safeguard misuse of money. So that is a challenge in Suriname. But we have a government now in place where I truly believe that they are understanding the metrics of good governance. But it is a challenge because you don't change a government in 1 or 2 years. It, we're looking at a high inflation rate. People are demotivated.
Yeah.
What you earn today, one US dollar, is next year 50% devaluated. It demotivates a lot of people. So what do you get? You get people that are hustling now after work to make ends meet, or you are sensitive to corruption. So it's not something that you should look on a focus. You should look at it on a broader perspective and say, listen, if you want to change the attitude and the leadership, we have to start very small. Get some good institutes in. Be transparent. How are you spending your money as a government? And be transparent. We're getting now the policies in place where there is a very transparent view on the spending of the government. So these things are getting in place, but it takes time because not everybody is happy and not
Yeah.
everybody wants transparency, right?
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting because your personal career is based in the IT world, and there's other is absolutes, is either one or the other. And I think that gives you a very interesting way in which you view economic progression or these ideas around national prosperity. Is having a look at the systems. What do you put in play? How well are they defined within the logic? And then what is going to be the output that comes from that? But the bottom line for that is for you as a Suriname person, as an individual looking at your country, do you feel proud?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And pride, if you want to have sincere pride, you should know where you come from. I know where we come from, and I know what we have achieved so far, and I know what the potential is. So definitely, I'm proud. Are there things that you say that should be done better? Absolutely, but it takes time, Rajan. It takes time. When it comes to you're referring to my role as the director in the IT, I see that the public sector, the private sector, is investing so much money in automation. Why? Because they understand they're part of the export market. They have to automate. They have to. If you want to compete, you have to have work efficiently, but more foremost effectively. So they understand it. I truly believe that if the private sector is fully digital and they are aware that I have to compete on a global market, it will trickle down to ultimately policies and the public sector. But we have a very strong and successful private sector in Suriname. They're doing business locally, regionally, and even export to Europe and the US.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We are. We have successful entrepreneurs that are one of you have companies in Barbados. We have construction companies that are doing a lot of work in Guyana as we speak. We have car retailers that started in Suriname, Surinamese origin, that are now bigger in Guyana. So the entrepreneurship, the private sector is very strong. No, I am very proud.
No, I was going to
And
say because I know that I'm looking at myself in the camera there because you're looking at my face, and I am shocked because I suppose the world really doesn't know much about Suriname. Yet you got a private sector that is having to, what I understand, punch above its weight because of previous administrative fails. So therefore, they've taken their lives in their own hands. To say, okay, we have to go out there to hunt,
yeah,
to eat, i.e., to make money. The world doesn't know enough about Suriname. And to attract FDI, to attract investors, you have to communicate. Has it been a lack of will, or is it a lack of know-how from the private sector or the government to kind of fly the flag of Suriname as big as it should be? Because ultimately, nothing's going to change if investors or even the global diaspora don't know enough about the opportunities there.
true. Let me go one step back. I think the reason that the private sector is very successful is we have a very strong, we have a very small population. We have 600,000 people living in Suriname. That's a very small community village in India. So investors should not come to Suriname to conquer this market.
Too
It's
small.
totally not
Absolutely.
interesting. So even the private sector understands if I want to produce and I want to grow, I have to go abroad. So the market for them is not only Suriname. They have to go to the Guyana is 800,000, Trinidad is 1.2 million. So and they have the relations, they have their network since the 70s and the 80s already. So it's very common for businessmen that are very successful to do business abroad. That's one. So they understand the metrics of the economies of scale. When it comes to investors, I truly believe that the private sector um, does does not. I went with a president to Dubai to do
Yeah.
a World Expo and everything. What they are focusing on is our nature and everything. I truly believe that if you look at, you should properly understand your USPs as a country. Our unique selling points are we have quite a well-educated population. I am in the ICT sector. We are Dutch speaking. We are providing IT services for Holland that nobody can provide. Not even Curacao, Aruba, and Bonaire are also former colonies of Holland, but we can provide the volumes. All the call centers of Holland that normally would go to India are now in Suriname. So they want support, Dutch speaking support. So you know you are unique in that way. They tried it in Turkey, they tried it in Morocco, it didn't work. So now they're all coming to Suriname. I'm providing software development services from Suriname for the Dutch market. It's a 15 years back we invested in a company because I work for a Dutch-based company. We invested in Suriname. We trained people. There was no IT education, but we knew that if you want to do proper software development, the language might be a benefit. So we are now gracing that opportunity. So when it comes to getting investors from India to Suriname, I think we should look at because we should look at if you want to do something for the Dutch market, you have a lot of big companies in India. Why not increase the scale of the services that you want to provide for the Dutch market, maybe for the English speaking market? India is very known for its outsourcing. So things that we are still going through have already been invented in India. So why not join force? I think the president was there 2 to 3 weeks back for a special session. I think they will bring back some good opportunities. I heard something about the ICT Institute. I heard they're looking at agriculture. We have enough land. You are closer to your market. So we have fresh water. These are all products that are very scarce
Yeah,
in the
but but
Caribbean.
but I suppose what again, looking at the very frank discussion about this, I really like this podcast. It's like a to and fro here. I feel like we need to have having coffee in the middle. But I think if we deal with again the elephant in the room is the fact that a lot of countries do call India, and it's not just India, but it's a global Indian community. You look at the US, for example, Fortune 500, the top companies there, top 10 companies, the CEOs, I think out of 7 of them are Indian origin. So we are the world's unofficial nation within a nation. We're proudly Surinamese, proudly British, but we have that ancestral roots that allows us that extended familiarity. So the world is courting the investors, but it's down to those countries to constantly communicate their message and say, hey, we are doing this. Now, any country can sign up MOUs. I think Suriname has many MOUs signed up with India
Absolutely.
that have been for
Absolutely.
over 20 years. How many of those MOUs have come into functionality? Well, the answer to that is a lot less than what we may
True.
think, because I think we're only looking at 4-5 out of that. And then the
Yeah.
other side, we've had lines of credit for over 80 billion for the last 5 years. How much money has been actively utilized? Well, it's very, very small. What's gone wrong? Because your pitch makes sense, Nilesh. I'm sitting here almost like a
Yeah.
Dragon's Den panelist thinking, invest,
I'll be,
invest,
I'll be,
invest.
I'll be very honest. I think it has to do with focus of the government. You know, we have two very strong partners. One is China,
Yeah.
the other is India. And I think for the last 10 years, I think the former government was very focused on the China line. And I don't know what the focus of this government is. I see a lot of China focus, but Now I see that they're also focusing on India. When you're talking about this types of investment strategic partnerships, the government involvement is crucial.
Yeah.
You have governments talking to governments first, and then it needs to trickle down to partnerships in the private sector. So if if something goes wrong on that top level, and you sign an MU and you cannot come to a solid partnership,
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't happen. I have the feeling that our president came back, and I think he came back with a lot of good, solid opportunities. Now the private sector has to go to the president and say, okay, let's do the matchmaking. Who are the companies that want to invest? Let's see which sectors can join in. I'm ready for the ICT. Straight and okay, I'll tell it to you. Whenever the ICT Institute will be settled here, I will be the first to
I
go to
think
the
I think even Ray Charles can see that you like the ICT part.
no, because I truly believe that if you want to think big, start small, do this.
Yeah.
Partnerships are very important. The success of the company that I work for has all to do with not having fear to share. I truly believe that 50% of one guilder, 50% of one guilder, 100% of one guilder is less worth than 50% of two guilders.
Mm.
I don't want to own 100% of one guilder. I think I have more money with 50% of two guilders.
Yeah.
If you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
Because we have two companies who are working. My growth will be multiplied. The risk are diminished because he is thinking about risk. I'm thinking about risk. We talk to each other. So I truly believe that if you want to grow, you need to share first, and you should be. And it has to do with, especially Indians want to own. I say own your market, own your. But please be just there to share. It's something that I have a lot of discussions with my friends who are also entrepreneurs. They want to own everything because
Yeah.
it's burhapa ke lati. You know what burhapa ke lati is? It's the wealth that I create is for my children, so they can take
Yeah,
care
it's
of me.
generational, and it's also a question of trust as well, because you want to have that
Exactly.
ownership of the verticals, because then you realize I can now control as much. But as you rightly said, the world has changed. It's about
Yeah,
forging partnerships with people who have the same intent, have the
yeah,
same mindset, and as well as having the legalities in place to say, why don't we work together? Now we get to grow at a rapid pace. We get further market penetration coming in, and now we have so much more in terms of purchasing power. And it makes sense.
absolutely.
It's common sense, but as you know, common sense is very rarely common. Look, to wrap it up, right? You got
Right.
the eyes and ears right now of one of the world's largest diasporas. What is your top 5 recommendations when they're looking to look, even if they're considering this small Dutch English speaking country in the middle of this South American sea that most people aren't familiar with? What are the cultural elements that they need to understand in order to be able to execute and understand how to do business within the country? Because it's much more than the numbers, isn't it?
It is. I think what is very important is that be aware that we if you want to do business with Suriname, we are not, we have a Dutch background, not an English background. The Anglo-Saxon background of doing business is very formal, Mr. Doctor. We are Dutch based, very down to earth. If you want to talk to us, hey, say Nilesh, what is happening? But keep in mind, Dutch are very strict. So when it comes to, hey, you said this, you have to do it. Don't say, no, I'll do tomorrow. No. So that is definitely something on the cultural element, because I do business in the English speaking Caribbean and I see they're very formal and they're very hierarchical. That's not the case in Suriname. So that's one. Secondly, keep in mind, if you're doing business, I had a guy from India coming here and he did a presentation, and his presentation was, yes, and Amitabh Bachchan, that's good if you have an Indian audience. But if you don't have a non-Indian audience, keep in mind we are
Know
we
your
are a
audience.
melting pot. Yes, know your
Yeah.
audience is something, because the people that were not India were like, okay, he
Who's
is
this
only
guy?
speaking to the Indians. Yeah, he's only
Yeah.
focusing on the Indians here, but we are more than that. That definitely something. And last but not least, I think that I truly believe that if you want to be successful in Suriname, you should work with partners. Um, we have very strong networks with Guyana, very strong networks with Trinidad. We have a 50% of the population of Suriname is living in Holland. We have 250,000 or 400,000 people living in Suriname. So we have a very strong tie with Holland as well. So if you do business with the Surinamese population, you automatically get access to the network of Holland because the ties are very strong.
Yeah.
To let you know, I have my sister and my father living in Holland. I came back. So what you gain is more than just doing business with Suriname. We have very strong ties with people, successful entrepreneurs in the US as well. So doing business with Suriname will give you more than just the Surinamese market. It
Yeah.
gives you access to other markets as well. I told you about the CARICOM and the Mercosur as well. So, but that would be a commercial pitch.
Nah,
I don't want to end with a commercial pitch.
well, going in this lighter side and the softer side. Obviously, you lived in Holland. Were you born
Yeah.
in Suriname or were you born in Holland?
No, I was born in Holland, and
Okay.
in primary school. My father decided to go back in the family business. So
Yeah.
in 1978, we came back. I was 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
I did a primary school, secondary school, and then my sister went to study in Holland, and I had to join her. So we moved to Holland.
Is there a difference between the Surinamese people in Holland compared to Surinamese people in Suriname? And I'm talking particularly that of the Indian descent. Because I know with the diaspora, it's quite interesting. You can have British Asians through to the Indians from India. But Suriname, because you have this really unique way, the cultural makeup is very different. And obviously you got the linguistics. What are some of the differences? Is there cultural differences?
Um, I must say that if you look at the Indian diaspora that moved to Holland, they are more conservative than the Indians in Suriname. Because whenever you move to a new country,
Yeah,
you
you hold
tend as
on, don't
parents
you?
to hold on to what you know as you grew up. This was the standard. So a lot of people, you would say, hey, they're moving to Europe, they would be more modern. But if you look at the cultural aspects, they are very
Yeah,
conservative. And in Suriname, we basically how is it? We had the evolution of changing things,
yeah,
blending
yeah,
things
yeah.
up. So that's one difference. And I think what you see now is that the Surinamese diaspora, they feel more Surinamese. The diaspora that moved to Holland, they feel more related to India. They will not say, I'm from Surinamese origin. They will say, I'm from Indian descent.
Oh,
We in
interesting.
Suriname say, I'm a Surinamese with roots in India. So that is definitely a difference. So the connection with Suriname in the second generation that is born and the third generation that is born, they don't say I am a Surinamese guy. They will say my ancestors are from Suriname,
Why
but
is
they will
that?
say because they lost the connection with Suriname.
So then for your parents, right, Suriname means something to them or it meant something to them. Would that be
Yeah,
right? Did they mean anything to Suriname?
definitely. But we had because of our own history, we had like a lot of people leaving the country in the end years of the 70s because of the economic
Yeah.
situation. So they left with a lot of grief and they were looking for a better future in Holland. So the parents, they still had this emotional connection with Suriname and they would bring their kids whenever it was possible because the parents of the people who left were still living here. Now we have generations that are born in Holland, so they don't have that emotional connection anymore. And that is something I see it with my sister's children. They are born and raised in Holland, and they don't have a very strong tie with Suriname because they come over that much. They will have the same connection with Suriname that the rest of the other Surinamese people would have, not specifically a special
Oh,
bond.
interesting.
Because
So
yeah,
what about for you, Nilesh? Does India mean anything to you?
I must say India had always had a very special place in my heart until I went to India in 2006.
Okay,
And
tell me
then, no,
more.
no, no, I'm not frightening you. I just wanted to say it had a special place in my heart before I went to India.
Yeah.
But once I went to India, I was sold. I found everything that I was made sense when I was in India. My
Really?
culture, my
Yeah.
culture made sense. The way I was raised made sense. why I am who I am made sense. Even though my ancestors left India 150 years back,
So run me
it
through what.
made perfect sense.
Give me some examples of what made sense for you. What was that
Why,
light
why,
shining
why, why
moment?
my parents were always pushing for education?
Yeah,
Why was education so important? Because I went to the area where my ancestors came from, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh.
yeah,
That is still the poverty. It's the
yeah,
least developed district in India. So that's why they say education will get you out of the mud. That is something that they say a lot is, if you want to get out of the mud, do your education.
absolutely.
I found out the sentence. I don't know if you speak English, but burhapa ke lathi means you are
Mm.
the stick where the elderly can lean on.
Yeah,
That is something. My father would always say, I'm only successful if my children do it better in life than me. And I
yeah,
was like, what is this guy talking about? It had all to do that if your children have to take care. So you have to give them everything to be successful. My parents made a lot of sacrifices to leave this country. My father was a very successful businessman in Suriname. And when my sister left, he had to join because you cannot leave your family. It's even if you are successful. My mother was very strict on that. Listen, I'm going with the church, you have to join me. So my father left the country and he was a very successful business and he left and he made sacrifices for his family. My sister is a doctor, I'm an engineer. You know what that means in the Indian community? You are very good, you are successful. So that
that's
was
it.
something that is very strong. Let me turn it around now. I have three daughters, and there you see that my Indianness is lowering. I said to my daughters, listen, your father did it pretty well, so I will not tell you what to study. But I hear from my Indian friends that is the new Indian way of thinking. So I told my daughter, make sure you finish high school and then you can do whatever you want. If you want to be
Oh,
a gymnast, go
what's your
ahead.
biggest fear then? You got three daughters. You're in Suriname. You're talking about all this great change. You're talking about this connection with Indianness. As a fellow dad, as a fellow entrepreneur sitting there, what are your greatest fears?
To be very honest,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
this is a discussion I have a lot with my wife. I fear that they will, because I want them to study in Holland, I fear that they will not come back to Suriname. And I think that would be a pity because we need our people back to build this country.
Why would they not come back?
Because, if you go to the West, it's all neat. There's no challenge there. Your career is flying. And then you go back to a third world country and it's not that flashy good thing,
Yeah.
so that is a concern. But I have a plan for them. I show them the nature of Suriname, the beauty of Suriname. Every weekend I am in the interior and I try to trigger this passion.
Yeah.
And hopefully when they are in the West, they will say, I miss my country, I miss the nature, I miss the good Suriname, and that they will come back. That's my wish. And that's my biggest fear. And one of the things that I always say to my friends, I think we should be ashamed that we in Suriname, we left for a better future and we left our grandparents here and they died alone. You were just coming back once a year, twice a year, and that's not what they deserve. They made a lot of sacrifices to get you educated, and at the end, when they are old and they need you the most, you were not there.
Yeah.
And that is something we should do. That's what I'm saying. Suriname should be so prosperous that we can have 4 or 5 generations living in this country. Everybody is happy because you are not the Burhapakelati anymore. If you leave this country and you don't come, that's
Yeah.
why I came back. Although my parents are there, I came back to start because I want to break this cycle of everybody being successful and moving to the West. We should bring the West to
What
Suriname.
would have to happen for your parents to move back to Suriname?
Well, my father is now 78, so he has a daughter there and myself here and my family. So he took the best of both worlds. So
Yeah.
he's spending a lot of time with his daughter. He lives on his own, but he has his daughter there, and he comes twice, some 3 times a year. He's for a month with me, and we spend good time. So he's satisfied with that. My mother passed away, so
Sorry to
he's
hear.
he's okay. He's okay with that. I asked him, Pop, you don't want to join? Live in Suriname? He said, Beta, mujhe wahan pe chhod do. So he said, you don't move an old tree, right?
Yeah.
The roots are already there. He said he's fine there. If he would miss Suriname, he would just come to me, and I have an apartment in my house, so he has his own place with me. And that's
Fantastic.
how we do it.
Nilesh, do you know, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. I feel like that there's a whole session here of us having a couple of beers around an open fire in the interiors of this mystical place called Suriname, where you're going to convert me to really live in that dream. But I think you are a phenomenal optimist in the way that you look at the world. And it's great to have you on.
Thank you so much, Rajan. It was a pleasure talking to you.
What an incredible conversation. I'm sure you agree. There's something really interesting about a community that has had a total dislocation of language and they find themselves in a new location. What does it do to your sense of identity? How does it shift those type of sensibilities, the sense of belonging, but also the ideas around diaspora? I have a sneaky feeling that this is the first of many more podcasts to come from that region. Well, I hope you enjoyed the show. Share your thoughts, share your love, share this with your friends and family so we can continue growing the world's largest living encyclopedia of people just like us. So until next week, stay well, stay safe, and I hope you enjoy following these 50 Shades of Brown discussions.
Global Indian Network. Print, TV, events, podcasts. Find out more at globalindianseries.com.